So, hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Tech of Tomorrow. In this podcast, we cover what I believe is the technology of tomorrow, which is humans. I think humans are the future in leading, in creating, and in innovating. And to celebrate the start of this show, I have a great guest. He's amazing, and he's a friend of mine, thankfully. This guy invented something that you might use quite often, which is image format called JPEGs. And he's also involved in machine learning, and he's a serial entrepreneur, and he doesn't need introduction. But Alex, how are you? Welcome.
Thanks for the invitation. Yeah, I just did the reference implementation for one of the JPEG standards, but I was a co-author of the PNG, the PNG image format.
How did that come about? I think people love to know, like, we take these formats for granted, but somebody authored them. So how did that happen? And how long ago was it?
So this was when I was, I think, 17 years old, and there was this wonderful forum system at the time called Usenet, where you had discussions on a variety of different topics, and there were the smartest people from the world talking there. And at some point, everyone was getting concerned about a big company suing developers because they were using a particular technology that they patented. And it wasn't even a particularly appropriate technology for the case. This was the GIF format, and a bunch of us were, why? Because GIF is not an appropriate format for so many things. It's so limited, just 256 colors. The new graphic technology is so much better. We can do better. So we self-organized. We formed a group of basically volunteers who worked on what later became the ping. And then it took about 15 years before this became the #1 format online. But this kind of shows you the amount of time that these things take. Like we think technology moves fast, but it's still cycles of decades.
Do we think technology move fast? Because what is it? Is it the internet that makes news spread so fast? Or is it just the fact that when a technology comes to us, it's already like very well adopted. So we feel, oh my God, it's new. What makes us feel like technology moves that fast?
We see ideas at the frontier. Like if you're interested in technology, you're going to see ideas at the frontier. You're going to see demos. You're going to see early versions of prototypes and products and so on. But it usually takes some time before these things percolate through society, before they get adopted. Like I was at an event at MIT last week where several companies were presenting technology for leveraging generative AI technology to help with mainframe software. Because the programmers that know how to program mainframes are dying, and still a bunch of infrastructure still runs on those mainframes. So now we're using generative AI to make 50-plus-year-old software work.
There's no replacement for mainframe as a software? Or it's just for the coders that still...
These applications have a lot of logic in there, and no one understands it anymore.
Wow. I was attending a course weeks ago. We were talking about the use of all technology as an advantage in specifically like critical situations and even war situations, where you can deploy all technology as a way to have the opposite party not see what you're doing or detect it.
So, do you know the ginkgo trees?
Nope.
So ginkgo trees are very primitive trees that come in male and female versions.
Okay.
And females are really discriminated upon because they produce fruit. And even though this fruit is really nutritious and make you smarter, if you eat the seeds, in most cases it messes up the sidewalk. So they just keep the males. Now, these trees are so ancient, but the cool thing for them is that all their predators went extinct.
Okay.
So they don't have diseases, they don't have pests because they went extinct.
It outlasted them.
It outlasted them.
And what's a technology that you think will outlast all the others right now? Because we see things moving so fast, and I'm tempted to think like, where is this going? Is everything we know going to change, or are some technologies going to stay?
It's a good topic for the next podcast. What are the ginkgos of technology?
What are the ginkgos of technology? Okay, good. Now you were at MIT, you said.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see anything that stood out to you? You saw that and you thought, oh my God, when this hits the public, it's gonna change things.
You know, it's hard to pick. There were several things that were really interesting. You know, I think there was one theme that was common to several of the folks, and it's a realization that as much as we know generative AI is good at summarizing and transforming and translating text, is that it's also incredibly effective at synthesizing programming code. And many professors and many startups are basically thinking about how to upgrade our ability to create software with this technology. And you know, the problem is, you know, software is kind of important, and you know, you don't really have an option to have a buggy piece of software, even though it was cheaply synthesized. So how do we improve the quality of software while reducing the cost of development of software? That's one topic that a bunch of the most interesting research and entrepreneurial efforts were about.
What's the implication of this for like people coding, software developers? Will they be more needed or less needed?
Like if you're a good software developer, you're going to be amplified.
Okay.
You're going to be able to do more, better, faster. If you're a bad developer, you can do more damage.
Okay.
Now, I think the new tools are going to allow folks who have previously not been able to program to still be able to do much more than they've ever been able to do before. So, you know, the product will have this ability to issue commands and instructions that that will change the user interface from picking something from a big menu towards just having a short conversation about what you want.
Do you think that's going to be the future of AI? Just converse more and more conversational. We're just going to talk to our devices and get our outputs?
It depends. You know, sometimes you're using a thing and you're using it constantly, and you're really familiar with it. And then you just want to, push something and slide something, like in an airplane. You don't want to have a conversation with the airplane, right? Like you need to be able to just push a button and something should happen. But sometimes there are things that you're not familiar with. Some things are things that are rare. And in those cases, we get lost or we make mistakes. And in those cases, the advantage of having some sort of a natural language command conversational interface will make a big difference. Also, like when you're using something for the first time, you haven't had the time to learn, where in the menu is that command. Like right now, we kind of go into help and then we try to find like the right way to do something. But this is suboptimal, right? Like the whole navigation through documents and searching through documentation like this is something that these new technologies dramatically improve upon.
Isn't that what Apple basically just announced with their new Siri, finally updated, finally smarter, that it will just have an overview of everything, all the documents in your account basically, and it can retrieve to you any information.
What's interesting is that Apple decided they want to work with, with one of the leaders in the field. That they might have tried to do it internally, and they've decided that this is something that is too hard to be competitive on. So, but obviously, I mean, if you've ever tried to get something from Siri that it wasn't particularly designed for, it didn't work. So I think this is going to be a really big upgrade.
Okay. I was looking at Apple and I remember reading, I don't know if this is right, so you might correct me or somebody listening might correct me, but I remember reading that Apple was the company among big tech that most bought AI companies, acquisitions. So if that's true, and they ended up partnering with OpenAI, is that because of what you said, that basically they didn't have the capabilities to just be competitive on AI, in AI on their own? So they just went for the market leader?
Well, Apple is a huge company, so of course they can acquire more companies. So I don't know the data, but just because they're biggest, this alone explains why they might be acquiring more companies than others.
True.
Now, I think Apple does care about the user experience a lot, right? And they recognize that like trying to do some sort of a subpar own effort in this direction is not going to lead to state-of-the-art user experience. So they're collaborating with other companies.
That would make sense. Also, I bet at this stage, at least, it's very hard to dethrone OpenAI in their own playground, basically, which is AI.
It is kind of interesting that both Microsoft and Apple, basically the leading two operating system companies, are depending upon OpenAI for this functionality. So, it's going to be interesting what is the alternative to that. Like it's never a good idea to have just like one provider of this type of technology. As good as it may be in the beginning, most organizations with time degrade. So what you don't want is you don't want to have a breakdown of the market. Like you don't want everyone to just, like, for example, what happened to Google and Google search, because like Google search was so dominant for so long, like search as a category has become challenged and the search experience doesn't quite work. The publishing of content that's been reliant on Google has been shrinking. Like there's so many problems when you just have one sole provider of this technology, because like as time goes on, it's almost like a physical law. A monopoly will become ever more expensive and increasingly self-serving.
What do you think of the topic of censorship? Because, Google went viral a couple of times for their inability to generate white people. And, free speech is a big topic right now, especially in America where you're at. So, like, without getting too political, what's your take on censorship and AI?
I mean, AI is a computer software, right? It's but AI is not itself intelligent. It creates an illusion of intelligence because it has processed text and documents and videos and podcasts from a bunch of intelligent humans talking about stuff, right? So whatever intelligence that comes out of OpenAI is really the intelligence of humanity as a whole that contributed data, information, content into this commons that is then used to train the AI. So, the AI technology is, like when you look at how it's designed, it's not biased. It's very unbiased. Like that's why it actually like it just reverts to whatever is the majority. And some people have a problem with that. And there are two ways of adjusting for this. The first way is you can add this random perturbation, which is like biased. Alternatively, you do personalization. So for example, like if you're, say of a particular demographic group, then when you say, give me a person, like that thing is going to give you a person in the context of who you are.
Mhm.
Right? Like without trying to be completely context free. So like if you're going to be asking for a person, in Bangladesh, you're not going to get the same result than if you're asking for a person in Japan. It's right now you have the same AI system, the same interface, and no context, or the context kind of reverts to, to like software engineers building AI tools in the US, right? Like this is the context where this technology was created. It's biased towards that context. It's biased towards whoever was contributing the data to train this intelligence, right? There's nothing wrong with that. It's unbiased, but like, it came from a particular context. So this is maybe one more reason why we want to avoid a monopolization of this technology, because if this technology is used by and developed by several groups around the world, then there is going to be both innovation, but there is also going to be personalization to different cultures.
Makes sense. You mentioned something interesting, which is a concern many people have, and a common belief that AI is actually intelligent, because it does give you that illusion of intelligence. Now, that said, is AI ever
Let
going
me
to...
ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. Like, you've read a book. Was the book intelligent?
No.
It's a
No.
silly question, right? The book is not intelligent because the book is the communication from an intelligent author, an editor, and a bunch of other people who worked on it.
True. That's a great
Same
metaphor.
thing. Same thing. Like, OpenAI is not really intelligent. It just translates the intelligence from, hundreds of thousands of books, from like millions of web pages, from millions of videos into a response that you get when you ask something.
Then is AGI a thing that will happen, or will it be only a better illusion of intelligence? Or is
All
AGI
right, so
not a
so
thing?
all right, so this this is not a question of science and technology. This is a question of game theory.
Okay.
So imagine you're OpenAI and you've got this product, okay, and you want like $1 trillion of capital. I mean, do you say like, okay, we're just gonna like parse more books and translate more human intelligence into a better product, or you're gonna say, well, we'll reach the next galaxy? Like there is this interest in this community to oversell what can be done and to create this myth, but this myth feeds it money, and then it's able to stay on top because it gets more money and more talent than anyone else.
It's a
But
narrative.
it's bullshit. It's
Yeah,
bullshit.
a narrative. That could give listeners some hope, because it just means that Skynet will not happen. We are safe from the murderous robots unless they program them.
Like there is this old tale about a mathematician that develops a formula that replicates God, and but it was a very complicated formula to solve, so needed more compute, and eventually like all the computers of the world were connected together to solve this formula, and the answer came, now there is God. Right, so it's less about intelligence here, and it's more about the power that you grant any technology. Okay, like all these stories like 1984 and so on are basically cautionary tales about giving too much power to either a government, to either a company, to either a religious leader, and so on. Like concentration of power is very often a bad thing. Like it's necessary when you're in a war against someone like that, right? But like you don't want to have a steady state where you have this type of concentrated power. And usually when you do allow this type of power concentration, there then follows wars and conflict and strife and all of that, right? And companies do want to concentrate because this gives them the power and the resources to make breakthroughs, but at the same time, it's dangerous, right? And there is always kind of a healthy balance between decentralization of power and like the structure of the hierarchy. So let me give an example, right? Like if you generate one company that has this like massive skyscraper of computers that will answer your questions, which is the vision of OpenAI that was shared by Sam Altman, that's kind of dangerous. Like this is like a single monolith somewhere that like one person could have the key to, right? And I don't think we want that. I think we want a more fractal structure of of intelligences, of libraries, of different groups developing tools that are competing with each other and complementing each other. So a lot of the discussion in the AI community right now is like, are we gonna have this thing centralized, say around OpenAI and its competitors, or are we going to have these things fundamentally decentralized, where you can run a large language model on your own computer, and while it's not as good as say ChatGPT, it's still surprisingly effective at very many things. So I think the learning from what happened to search engines because of the Google centralization should really encourage us to favor a more decentralized approach to generative AI.
Do you think this will go to the policy level, like some kind of antitrust moment where we have to split up? No, I'm not saying now, but if OpenAI were to get big enough, would it eventually get?
Governments are the measure of last resort. Like I think we should not wait for the government. I think as a community, as a society, we should be advocating for multipolarity of this type of technological development.
Yes. Also, when too much regulation comes into place, you get Europe, where innovating becomes hard because anything you produce anything you try to innovate upon is either extremely regulated or starts to be regulated. So Europe tends to be behind on things.
Yeah, there are challenges everywhere. I've been involved to some extent in these efforts to do this regulation, and I've been surprised by how few of the participants were experts in this technology that understood the risks and cared about the well-being of society, and how many there were just run-of-the-mill activists with their own little agenda who wanted to push that agenda through this technology. And like when you look at the AI regulations, they're like infested with these agendas.
That's sad to see, because also
just like a little group of people, who want the best for that little group and don't care about the others, or actually want to like take resources from the others. Like, and our society is full of these little groups that think they're somehow better or more deserving or greater victims or whatever than everyone else. And almost like the silent majority that kind of cares for everyone regardless of who they are just gets to be at the shorter end of the stick repeatedly. And I think we should not be tolerant of like the small selfish groups anymore.
Agree. And isn't the problem with the silent majority the fact that it's silent?
And yes, that's why we need a radical like radical centrism of sorts, where we're not silent anymore.
Yes, will be necessary.
But we're also not the identitarian majority. We're the kind of radical majority of everyone, like an inclusive center of sorts.
that would be the way to go, and would be a way out of this weird social landscape in which, at least in Western countries, we are in. But listen, this podcast is called Tech of Tomorrow, and as I said, the focus is also not the tech but the human, because I think humans are great, and I would like to feature here more visionaries, leaders like you, because I do see you as a leader because of your career and what you've done. So, would you mind sharing where your career is at right now, and what's what are the biggest lessons that you're taking into whatever it is that you're doing now from the past?
Well, probably the biggest lesson was what was going on during the pandemic. So I was looking at data. I'm by training an AI researcher and a data scientist. So I like to look at the world through data. And I was looking at what was happening in Wuhan early in the pandemic. This was like early 2020. And what I saw did not look good. So I got this idea to create a dashboard that would convey the situation in the best way possible. And in collaboration with a bunch of other volunteers, we created this for one European country. And when you look at the excess mortality, that country barely had any excess during the first wave of COVID. And in part, it's because of our effort to bring the whole society together around a dashboard and around high quality data and high quality models to understand that. And that effort was so successful that it became the #1 search term on Google in the whole year, in the whole country.
Okay.
Okay, but then it's interesting when you look at like, what were the other things people searched for? So #2 was weather. What is weather? Weather is data. Okay, #3 was the soccer championship, which is also data. It's data about sports. #4 is earthquakes, which is also data. And #5 was NBA, which is also sports data. Like basically the first 5 terms that were most searched for in the whole year, in the whole country, were basically searches for data. And yet, so much of the internet is about pages and articles and documents, which is the old model. Like I don't think that we've recognized that data is mainstream, and improving the way the data is presented and analyzed and interacted with is what we should be working on.
It's probably because people think of data as numbers moving very quickly on some kind of dashboard, and they don't associate the NBA with data, because if you say like, but they're actually looking for data. So probably
They are.
it's the framing.
Well, I would say data is like, the ingredients of insight. And you can deliver that insight, with the use of charts and graphs and maps and highlights and recordings and so on. But like these things can be organized in a fundamentally better way than, the old approach of having articles or papers or chapters.
How are you applying this lesson to your future or your current reality in business?
I started a company called Data.Flowers. Same spelling as Data.Flowers, but it's really about data flow. And what we're doing is we're reducing the amount of effort that it takes to have a state-of-the-art data presentation that allows you to kind of go up, and zoom out and see data at low resolution, but holistically, and then to zoom in and see every individual data point, so no one's like manipulating it, right? Like you need to be able to see everything, but then also like zoom in and verify the facts underneath. So usually this works when you've got an organization that has data, but that data is not fully utilized in terms of its potential. And then Data.Flowers elevates that data by developing a better data presentation.
How do you see Data.Flowers improving the world in 5 to 10 years?
Well, data-driven, data-centric thinking is so much better, more accurate, less biased, less prone to manipulation. So I think Data.Flowers can make the world more intelligent as a whole, and also faster to move, faster to self-organize, faster to address problems.
I like that. How big is the company right now?
It's tiny.
It's
It's
tiny.
tiny. But companies, even if they're growing, they still need to start from a good seed in a way.
Agree. And you've been in companies of many sizes, right? So what's the main challenge you faced in leading people?
It really depends on your strengths and weaknesses, right? Like my strength might be the vision, but my weakness is that the vision might not have the right timing, or that might need too many resources, or that the vision is too complex for people to understand and appreciate, or that I'm not necessarily willing to undertake the the PR strategies of spinning a better myth. Like for example, AGI is such a myth. I would never talk about it. Yet people who talk about it are the ones that get funding, right? So what do you do? I mean, do you compromise your integrity by spinning myths, or do you just linger in the background, ineffectual?
Well, there's a counter strategy, which is you attack the myth, and that's how you get your portion of the pie.
I should entertain this strategy, perhaps.
Yes.
Or maybe we can do it together.
Yes.
Attack the myth.
I'm open to that. There's nothing that amuses me more, even in my own field, as just destroying sacred cows. There's something to it, and it tends to ruffle some feathers, but it also gets you some attention.
Yeah. I mean, I like cows. I don't want anything bad to happen to them. What metaphor should we use?
We just skin the cat a different way and use metaphors that don't hurt animals.
I like cats too, like.
Hey, me too. But yeah, and so in building companies from the vision up, or like even bigger organizations, where do you think executives or just business people get wrong most of the time?
When you lead a large organization, and if it's a successful organization, there is going to be a certain type of person that will gravitate towards power and resources, and it's a manipulator, with sharp elbows, and those people can then cause a huge amount of damage directly, but even more damage is created indirectly because the level of trust falls in an organization. And then when you have executives in conditions where they don't trust their colleagues, you can get a situation where the CEO is just going to do whatever they think, and they're going to insufficiently leverage the collective intelligence of the team. So then they're going to be effective within their own area of capability, and they're going to be very ineffective outside of that. But it takes faith, like last week, I had a prepared presentation, and my advisor told me that presentation is going to be boring in that crowd, and you should like radically gut in and do it differently. And he sent me the slides like 1 hour before my presentation.
Okay.
So I was like, do I trust him? Or do I just do the thing that like I designed and I feel is safe? What would you do? Like, would you just put blind trust into something that's like crazy, but you know that person and you know that they're really good at what they do? Or would you do the safe thing?
I would go with my gut based on a specific situation, but if I had to pick in this one, I would probably, you were speaking to people, right? So I would probably go for what makes me more excited because excitement is contagious. And if you're out there hesitating, you might not convey the message you want to convey. So I don't know what you did, but that's what I would have done.
Well, I trusted my friend, and I did a crazy thing. And like for the first time, I kind of got this like back slap on my way off the stage, even though I was like unprepared. I didn't have time to really prepare the talk. Like I was just shooting from the hip. But it was different. It was very different. Like I wasn't talking about our technology. I was talking about data hell and data flow.
And how did it go? How did the audience react?
Met a bunch of people and got invited for an interview. So, of course, we're going to see what the results are going to be, but I think it was the right decision.
It's great. Yeah. It takes courage, to just go out there with not feeling super prepared and do it anyway. I love that. I love the boldness in that. Just you trusted that person and you're like, I'm gonna do this even though I didn't have the time to prepare. I like it. Maybe because I'm dangerously a fan of winging things sometimes, but I like it.
The ability to wing comes from a lot of preparation.
That's deep.
So you can improvise when you've been doing it for a long time.
It's like simplicity, right? You can explain something simple once you master that thing.
Yeah, people make this mistake. They confuse the word simplistic with simple.
True.
Simplistic is too simple. It's oversimplified, right? But simple is virtue. Simplistic is thin, but simple is virtue.
I like that. Listen, Alex, time is running out, so I would thank you for this one. I would like to have you on the show again. And this was great. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. And talk to you soon.
Talk soon,
Off
people.
from the air.
Yes, off the air. People, this was the Tech of Tomorrow podcast. See you in the next episode.